As for myself, I read the Lotus Sutra without having to remember to, and practice it even when I do not read its words aloud. During the course of countless kalpas, while transmigrating through the 6 paths and the 4 forms of birth, I may at times have risen in revolt, committed theft, or broken into others' homes at night and, on account of these offenses, been convicted by the ruler and condemned to exile or death. This time, however, it is because I am so firmly resolved to propagate the Lotus Sutra that people with evil karma have brought false charges against me. Hence my exile. Surely this will work in my favor in future lifetimes. In this latter age, there cannot be anyone else who upholds the Lotus Sutra 24 hours of the day and night without making a deliberate effort to do so. There is one other thing for which I am most grateful. While transmigrating in the 6 paths for the duration of countless kalpas, I may have encountered a number of sovereigns and become their favorite minister or regent. If so, I must have been granted fiefs and accorded treasures and stipends. Never once, however, did I encounter a sovereign in whose country the Lotus Sutra had spread, so that I could hear its name, practice it and, on that very account, be slandered by other people and have the ruler send me into exile. The Lotus Sutra states, as for this Lotus Sutra, throughout immeasurable numbers of lands one cannot even hear its name, much less be able to see it, accept and embrace, read and recite it. Thus those people who slandered me and the ruler, who had me banished, are the very persons to whom I owe the most profound debt of gratitude. One who studies the teachings of Buddhism must not fail to repay the 4 debts of gratitude. According to the Contemplation on the Mind Ground Sutra, the first of the 4 debts is that owed to all living beings. Were it not for them, one would find it impossible to make the vow to save innumerable living beings. Moreover, but for the evil people who persecute bodhisattvas, how could those bodhisattvas increase their merit? The second of the 4 debts is that owed to one's father and mother. To be born into the 6 paths, one must have parents. If one is born into the family of a murderer, a thief, a violator of the rules of proper conduct, or a slanderer of the law, then even though one may not commit these offenses oneself, one in effect forms the same karma as those who do. As for my parents in this lifetime, however, they not only gave me birth but made me a believer in the Lotus Sutra. Thus I owe my present father and mother a debt far greater than I would, had I been born into the family of Brahma, Shakra, one of the 4 heavenly kings, or a wheel-turning king, and so inherited the threefold world or the 4 continents, and been revered by the 4 kinds of believers in the worlds of human and heavenly beings. The third is the debt owed to one's sovereign. It is thanks to one's sovereign that one can warm one's body in the 3 kinds of heavenly light and sustain one's life with the 5 kinds of grain that grow on earth. Moreover, in this lifetime, I have taken faith in the Lotus Sutra and encountered a ruler who will enable me to free myself in my present existence from the sufferings of birth and death. Thus, how can I dwell on the insignificant harm that he has done me and overlook my debt to him? The fourth is the debt owed to the 3 treasures. When the thus come one Shakyamuni was engaged in bodhisattva practices for countless kalpas, he gathered all of the good fortune and virtue he had gained thereby, divided it into 64 parts, and took on their merit. Of these 64, he reserved only 1 part for himself. The remaining 63 parts he left behind in this world, making a vow as follows: there will be an age when the 5 impurities will become rampant, erroneous teachings will flourish, and slanderers will fill the land. At that time, because the innumerable benevolent guardian deities will be unable to taste the flavor of the law, their majesty and strength will diminish. The sun and moon will lose their brightness, the heavenly dragons will not send down rain, and the earthly deities will decrease the fertility of the soil. The roots and stalks, branches and leaves, flowers and fruit will all lose their medicinal properties as well as the 7 flavors. even those who became kings because they had observed the 10 good precepts in previous lifetimes will grow in greed, anger, and foolishness. The people will cease to be dutiful to their parents, and the 6 kinds of relatives will fall into disaccord. At such a time, my disciples will consist of unlearned people without precepts. For this reason, even though they shave their heads, they will be forsaken by the tutelary deities and left without any means of subsistence. It is in order to sustain these monks and nuns, that I now leave these 63 parts behind. Moreover, as for the benefits that the Buddha had attained as a result of his practices, he divided them into 3 parts, of which he himself made use of only 2. For this reason, although he was to have lived in this world until the age of 120, he passed away after 80 years, bequeathing the remaining 40 years of his lifespan to us. Even if we should gather all the water of the 4 great oceans to wet inkstones, burn all the trees and plants to make ink sticks, collect the hairs of all beasts for writing brushes, employ all the surfaces of the worlds in the 10 directions for paper, and, with these, set down expressions of gratitude, how could we possibly repay our debt to the Buddha? Concerning the debt owed to the law is the teacher of all Buddhas. It is because of the law that the Buddhas are worthy of respect. Therefore, those who wish to repay their debt to the Buddha, must first repay the debt they owe to the law. As for the debt owed to the Buddhist order, both the treasure of the Buddha and the treasure of the law are invariably perpetuated by the order. To illustrate, without firewood, there can be no fire, and if there is no earth, trees and plants cannot grow. Likewise, even though Buddhism existed, without the members of the order who studied it and passed it on, it would never have been transmitted throughout the 2,000 years of the former and middle days into the latter day of the law. Accordingly, the Great Collection Sutra states, suppose that, in the last of the 500-year periods, there should be someone who harasses unlearned monks without precepts by accusing them of some offense. You should know that this person is extinguishing the great torch of Buddhism. Therefore, the debt we owe to the order is difficult to recompense. Thus it is imperative that one repay one's debt of gratitude to the 3 treasures. In ancient times, there were sages such as the Boy Snow Mountains, Bodhisattva Ever Wailing, Bodhisattva Medicine King, and King Universal Brightness, all of whom offered their lives in order to make such repayment. The first offered his body as food to a demon. The second sold his own blood and marrow. The third burned his arms, and the fourth was ready to part with his head. Ordinary people in this latter age, however, though receiving the benefits of the 3 treasures, completely neglect to repay them. How, then, can they attain the Buddha way? The contemplation on the mind ground, the Brahmanet, and other sutras state that those who study Buddhism and receive the precepts of perfect and immediate enlightenment, must repay the 4 debts of gratitude without fail. I am but an ignorant ordinary person made of flesh and blood. I have not rid myself of even a fraction of the 3 categories of illusion. Yet, on account of the Lotus Sutra, I have been reviled, slandered, attacked with swords and staves, and sent into exile. In light of these persecutions, I believe I may be likened to the great sages who burned their arms, crushed their marrow, or did not begrudge being beheaded. This is what I mean by immense joy. The second of the 2 important matters is that I feel intense grief. The 4th volume of the Lotus Sutra states, if there should be an evil person who, his mind destitute of goodness, should for the space of a kalpa appear in the presence of the Buddha and constantly curse and revile the Buddha, that person's offense would still be rather light. But, if there were a person who spoke only one evil word to curse, or defame the laypersons, monks or nuns, who read and recite the Lotus Sutra, then his offense would be very grave. When I read this and similar passages, my belief is aroused, sweat breaks out from my body, and tears fall from my eyes like rain. I grieve that, by being born in this country, I have caused so many of its people to create the worst karma possible in a lifetime. Those who beat and struck Bodhisattva never disparaging came to repent of it while they were alive. Yet, even so, their offences were so difficult to expiate, that they fell into a Vichy hell, and remained there for 1,000 kalpas. But those who have done me harm have not yet repented of it, even in the slightest. Describing the karmic retribution that such people must receive, the Great Collection Sutra states, the Buddha asked, if there should be a person who draws blood from the bodies of 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 Buddhas, in your thinking, how is it? Will he have committed a grave offense or not? The great King Brahma replied, if a person causes the body of even a single Buddha to bleed, he will have committed an offense so serious that he will fall into the hell of incessant suffering. His offense will be unfathomably grave, and he will have to remain in the greater Vichy hell for so many kalpas that their number cannot be calculated, even by means of counting sticks. Graver still is the offense a person would commit by causing the bodies of 10,000 or 1,000,000 Buddhas to bleed. No one could possibly explain in full either that person's offense or its karmic retribution, no one, that is, except the thus come one himself. The Buddha said, Great King Brahma, suppose there should be a person who, for my sake, takes the tonsure and wears a surplice. Even though he has not at any time received the precepts and therefore observes none, if someone harasses him, abuses him, or strikes him with a staff, then that persecutor's offense will be even graver than that, of injuring 10,000 or 1,000,000 Buddhas. Nichiren, the 16th day of the first month in the second year of Kocho, 1262, cyclical sign Mizuno Inu Takudo Seiken no Jo. This audiobook is dedicated to Kudo Yoshitaka and Kyonin Bo, for giving their lives to protect Nichiren in the Komatsubara Persecution, November 11, 1264.